The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Speaker, thank you for recognising me as well. It's always a relief, isn't it, when you take a call to have
I recognise that member as well.
Correct name attributed to you. Can I just say that it's a really pleasurable time in the House, not only for so many parties to be supporting such an important bill, but also to acknowledge the process that has been gone through, which I would commend to other ministers to follow. There have been concerns raised by Holly Walker, a member of the Green Party, which we listened to and responded in a respectful way. There was an amendment moved by my colleague, the Honourable Trevor Mallard, which was considered properly and agreed to. Both those processes have made the bill better. And I think if that happened more often and people were less entrenched in the politics of their party and less determined to score points at other people's expense, then not just legislation, but I think this Parliament would be a better place. So there's a lot of potential for improvement, shall we say, Mr Speaker. Certainly the Code of Conduct that you yourself, Mr Speaker, have proposed would also contribute in that regard. I want to acknowledge the history of this legislation. It's been around for a long time. My colleague, the Honourable Annette King, put it in place. And the reason that she instigated the work to be done on this legislation was because it was clear that not just members of Parliament, but actually the citizens of our country were frustrated with the lack of ability of inquiries to get the information that they were set up to get because of the range of powers, their abilities, their opportunities were limited because of our legislation. That isn't good enough. When we have something serious, whether it's tragic or otherwise, or a matter that is of public concern, the public deserve to have the information from an inquiry that would lead them to say, now I understand what happened, and then we as a Parliament can say, shall we do something about that? And we've had some very significant tragedies that I'll just refer to in a little bit. But going back to my point, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Annette King set up this process because of the level of dissatisfaction with the range of powers and responsibilities inquiries had. They didn't meet the public expectation. The bill was referred to, when it finally got to the House, the bill was referred to the Government Administration Select Committee, ably chaired at that time by the Honourable David Parker. And the junior member of that Select Committee was our Deputy Leader, Grant Robertson. So you can tell it was quite a long time ago. That bill was considered and came back to the House in 2009. I omitted to mention another person who deserves credit, and that's the Honourable Rick Barker, who was the Minister who actually introduced the legislation. Honourable Annette King set up the process for looking at the policy, and the Honourable Rick Barker introduced it. So it came back to this Parliament on the 20th of November 2009. It is now the third week in August in 2013. So it's been around a long time, nearly 4 years on the order paper. We've had examples this week of mismanagement of the House. The House is moving into urgency again next week, we're told. I'm not quite sure if it's Wednesday or Thursday or both days. But either way, this is another example of the inability of the National Party government to run the House properly. I wouldn't presume that any other Cabinet Minister would be better than the Honourable Jerry Brownlee, but he has got a lot on. I wish he'd put the Port Hills zoning review as a bit of a priority because we've just had another delay in the announcement of that. That announcement to the Port Hills residents, my constituents, was due, by the way, Mr Speaker, prior to Christmas last year, not Christmas this year, Christmas last year, so we're still waiting for that. Some people listening to this debate might say, why is the scope, why is the range, why are the responsibilities, the abilities of panel members in inquiry, why are they important? Well, Mr Speaker, if you look at the two recent tragedies that we've had where there have been inquiries, the huge tragedy and loss of life in Pike River and the massive tragedy and loss of life in the collapse of the CTV building and PGG building in Canterbury, 115 lives lost in the CTV building. People who were just going about their day-to-day business had no ability to understand the lack of structural strength of that building, who died as a result their family members, the family members of both the CTV victims and the men who died in Pike River, their families at the very least deserve to know every single detail. It will never bring their lost family members back, but it will give them the respect and the information that they deserve to have. And currently, our range of inquiries don't have that ability. This bill fixes that, and I think it's a jolly good thing that this Parliament is not only progressing this finally, but is doing it, as I said right at the beginning of my contribution, is doing it in such a robust way. That should give more confidence to the public of New Zealand that when there is something that is of public concern, something that should have public information, that this Parliament acknowledges that and has ensured that every bit of information is gathered as robustly as possible. It's a real shame that that ability wasn't available in the recent David Henry approach. I feel so sorry for Mr Henry. I don't actually know him as an individual, but he was handpicked to take on the job of finding out what happened in the Kitteridge report. He clearly didn't have the mandate that he wanted, but he called on the office of the Prime Minister, who seemed to have leaned on a few people. The political advisor, Wayne Eagleson, in the Prime Minister's office seemed to have leaned on a few people. In the end, we had access given to information about a minister's phone log and a minister's swipe card access, so that the inquiry knew where the minister went all around the building and who he'd rung and who he'd received phone calls from, and the same applied to a Fairfax journalist. I think that's appalling. If that inquiry had had the power to call witnesses, require them to attend, and to make testimony under oath, then we may not have had the situation that we've had now. What we've ended up with, instead of a robust process where we actually find out the facts of the situation, what we've ended up with is a terrible, murky situation. A minister's resigned on a point of principle. A journalist has had her professional work exposed in a very unusual way, in a very unfortunate way. A senior public servant from Parliamentary Services has resigned from his position, and David Henry, who headed the inquiry, was attacked with some vitriol from the media representation by Judith Collins, described by her colleague Jerry Brownlee today as a drama queen. That was a bit unfortunate, true though it may have been. And Anne Tolley and Jerry Brownlee himself attacked Mr Henry. So that position isn't satisfactory, and I hope that we don't end up with it happening again, and this bill, as I said, Mr Speaker, should fix that. So why is this bill, having been started off in 2008 and sitting on the order paper since 20th of November 2009 after consideration by the Select Committee, why is this bill back before the House now? Well, the reason for that is because of the contamination and the concerns by people who import our dairy products about the safety of our goods, and the desire by the government to have an inquiry that resolves that concern, that answers all the questions, not just to the New Zealand public, although of course we all want to know that not only is it investigated properly and anybody held accountable is held accountable, but also that it's fixed, that the problem doesn't arise again. And I totally support that inquiry having the ability to do that. And the reason I support that is because I don't think there would be a single member of Parliament, regardless of party, who wouldn't agree that our number one consideration must be the safety of consumers. If we sell goods domestically or export them, we must be able to assure consumers, particularly children, of the safety of those goods. And at the moment, that's a little bit under a cloud because of recent events. So Labor certainly backs the desire of the government to have a robust inquiry into this so that we can give everybody the confidence they need about the safety of our products. Our international reputation as an exporter is at stake here. We have to ensure that that reputation is protected and perhaps even enhanced, actually, by the rigour of such an inquiry. But more importantly, as I said, Mr Speaker, we have to guarantee the safety of consumers of our exports. Our biggest company is Fonterra. It's important not just in the New Zealand economy, but it's important in our social structure as well, with the number of jobs it provides, with the number of other businesses that it supports. So the hard questions will need to be asked about the situations that have arisen. I'm sure they will be, by the additional powers that have been given, and I again want to commend the process of listening to concerns of Holly Walker and supporting the amendments of Trevor Mallard. It's a good process, it's a better bill as a result.
Mr Speaker.
Good. I call the honourable member Holly Walker. I have to be able to hear you, Ms Walker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.